So this takes place back in 2005, while I was serving at the U.S. Embassy in the Ivory Coast, West Africa. One morning, after working my night shift at the embassy, I returned home to the Marine House. The U.S. Marines lived in a local residence bought and paid for by the U.S. Embassy. It was a 3-story home in what locals would consider an upscale neighborhood by Ivorian standards. The home was fairly large and had a pool, gym, laundry room, and driver's room on the first floor. It housed 5 U.S. Marines who were tasked with protecting the U.S. Embassy and its personnel. On this morning, I was pretty tired. I had just arrived in the country and was still getting used to the night shift work, lots of Red Bulls. I walked up to my room, which was on the 3rd story of the house. It was a medium-sized room with an attached bathroom and one large window fitted with heavy curtains to keep the daylight out so we could sleep during the day. I was crashing hard from all the Red Bulls. I managed to take my uniform off and get straight into bed. It wasn't long before I reached that state of mind where you're half asleep and half awake. I believe I was at the point where I started dreaming when some sort of 6th sense told me, "You have to wake up." I remember opening my eyes and staring at the opposite wall at the foot of my bed. The room was dark, and I was still half asleep as I scanned from the left side of my room to the right. I recall my eyes concentrating on the daylight that was shooting down the side of the wall towards the corners of my room. As my eyes reached the far right corner, I stopped and focused on a dark spot in the corner of the room. I couldn't make out what it was, but the light abruptly stopped before hitting the corner of the room. As I stared at this dark spot, I realized it was a silhouette of a person. It was tall, and I could make out the outline of shoulders and a head. My first instinct was that I was dreaming, but after a few seconds, my vision cleared up, and the silhouette was still standing there. As I focused harder on it, I realized it wasn't disappearing, and the realization that something was standing there hit me. I had a quick flash thought of, "What is that?" When all of a sudden, this shadow figure with red eyes that I could see clearly now rushed forward and started choking me. Still to this day, I remember the grip it had and the flash of heat I felt run down the back of my neck all the way down to my feet. I closed my eyes tightly and was paralyzed. I couldn't move. The level of fear that struck me was immense. After about 10 seconds, I felt the grip letting go, and as soon as I could move, my first action was to reach for my K-bar knife I kept on top of my nightstand. I quickly stood up, ready to defend myself against whatever was in my room. The next couple of seconds were me tearing my curtains open and clearing the room and restroom, repeating, "What the heck? What the heck? Jesus Christ, what the heck?" My room was completely empty. I went from attack mode to quickly trying to convince myself it was just a side effect of this medication I was on. One of the cons of working in an African post was that we were ordered to take mefloquine, an anti-malaria medication, by our command. One of the side effects clearly stated was the possibility of night terrors. Regardless, I couldn't stay in that room. I ended up falling asleep in the common area with the TV turned on. Fast forward 5 months, and we, the Marines, moved out of that home and into the new embassy compound that had just been constructed. One night, a fellow Marine and I decided to have a movie night and watch The Exorcism of Emily Rose, a creepy movie. When it was done, I walked into the kitchen and ran into Sammy, our butler. Sammy was in charge of doing our laundry and prepping our meals throughout the week. He was amazing. When he wasn't working for us, he spent his time as a Catholic priest at a local church. With the movie fresh in my mind, I asked him, "Sammy, if we got possessed by the devil, could you perform an exorcism?" Sammy replied, "Of course, sir. I do them quite often. Many bad spirits here in Côte d'Ivoire." "Seriously, Sammy?" "Yes, sir. Many evil here." "When we moved in, did you bless our new house?" "Yes, of course, sir. This is a very good home." He paused. "Not like the old house. That was a very bad house." Instantly, I went cold and asked him to explain. "The old house was possessed by 3 demonic spirits," he said. He then went on to tell me that one morning, while he was doing our laundry in the basement of our old home, he looked into the marine gym and saw 3 shadow figures with red eyes standing side by side in the corner of the room. He grabbed his crucifix and began to pray before they vanished. He then instructed me to go speak with Joey, one of our Ivorian marine drivers. I hauled ass to find Joey. Joey was a 49-year-old father of 8 who had worked for 15 years as the embassy marine driver. Joey told me that one night, after dropping off one of the Marines, he returned to the driver's room where he tried to get some sleep. He was awakened by something whispering his name. When he opened his eyes, something grabbed him and started choking him. He said he swung his arms wildly, but couldn't hit the thing that was choking him. When it finally released him, he ran out of the driver's room, hopped into the armored suburban marine vehicle, and drove to the U.S. Embassy, where he remained the rest of the night. He never again stepped foot in the driver's room. He told me that sometime later, our gardener accidentally dug up a juju box with bones and voodoo witchcraft trinkets inside. Apparently, somebody had cursed the property, according to him. As if the story couldn't get weirder, I headed inside the U.S. Embassy later that day to speak with my gunnery sergeant about some work. Our conversation turned to what I had just learned about our old house. Gunny had this look on his face, reached up to his logbooks, pulled out an incident report binder from a few years prior, and pulled out a report where a former Marine at the post had reported an intruder in his room that had choked him and disappeared. He slept in the room I slept in. The Marine was so convinced it happened that an official U.S. Embassy report had to be filed. I've been on the force for over 20 years, and I thought I had seen it all. Murders, assaults, the kind of depravity that makes you lose faith in humanity. But nothing prepared me for what I encountered that night in the old Hamilton house. It was a quiet evening in our small town, the kind of night where you could hear the crickets chirping and the wind rustling through the trees. I was just finishing my shift when the call came in, a noise complaint from the Hamilton place. That house had been abandoned for years, ever since old man Hamilton passed away. No one had the guts to buy it, not with all the rumors about it being haunted. I drove out there, thinking it was probably some kids messing around. The place looked just as I remembered. A dilapidated Victorian mansion, windows boarded up, ivy creeping up the sides like skeletal fingers. I parked my cruiser and grabbed my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. As I approached the front door, I noticed it was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning like a wounded animal. The air inside was thick with dust and decay. The smell was overwhelming, a mix of mold and something else, something metallic, blood. My flashlight flickered as I stepped inside, the floorboards creaking under my weight. "Hello? This is the police," I called out, my voice echoing through the empty halls. There was no response, just the eerie silence of an abandoned house. I moved deeper into the house, my heart pounding in my chest. Every shadow seemed to twist and writhe as if the darkness itself was alive. I reached the living room and saw something that made my blood run cold. In the center of the room, there was a circle of candles, their flames flickering eerily. In the middle of the circle lay a body. I approached cautiously, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The body was that of a man, his eyes wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. His mouth was twisted into a silent scream, and his chest was covered in strange symbols, carved deep into his flesh. I recognized the man immediately. It was Joe, one of the local drunks who often caused trouble around town. But what was he doing here? And who did this to him? I reached for my radio to call for backup when I heard a noise behind me, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. I spun around, my flashlight catching a glimpse of something moving in the shadows. "Who's there?" I shouted, but there was no answer, just that whispering, growing louder and more insistent. I backed away, my pulse racing, when I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I spun around again, but there was no one there. The whispering grew louder, surrounding me, filling my head with unintelligible words. I stumbled back, my flashlight falling to the floor and rolling away, plunging me into darkness. In the dim light of the candles, I saw them, figures, shadowy and indistinct, moving toward me. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and their mouths moved in unison, chanting something in a language I couldn't understand. I tried to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot as they closed in around me. One of the figures stepped forward, its face inches from mine. It grinned, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. "You shouldn't have come here," it hissed, its breath cold against my skin. I screamed, finally finding my voice, and everything went black. When I came to, I was lying outside the house, the sun rising in the distance. My flashlight was beside me, its beam cutting through the early morning mist. I scrambled to my feet and ran to my cruiser, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the keys. I drove straight to the station, not daring to look back. I reported what I saw, but no one believed me. They found Joe's body, but there was no sign of the symbols, no evidence of the figures I saw. They said it was just a noise complaint, that I must have imagined everything in the darkness. But I know what I saw, and every night since then, I hear the whispering, growing louder, calling me back to the Hamilton house. I know they're waiting for me, and I fear one day I'll have no choice but to go back. Around the age of 19, I was disqualified from the military due to a medical condition. I wasn't sure what to do with my life, since this had been a lifelong dream, and I felt very lost. During this time, I did a lot of soul-searching, studying many religions and philosophies. At some point, I got into occultism, the law of attraction, meditation, and finally, astral projection. To keep it short, I started meditating to attract into my life the things I wanted, and I also began to practice astral projection. After a few weeks, my aunt started to come into my room, scared, and began to question what I was doing. I told her I was meditating quite frequently, sometimes up to 3 hours a day. Why was she asking? She told me that something very weird had just happened in the house. In fact, for a few days now, several weird things had been happening. She told me that while they were watching TV, the front door of the house unlocked itself, and the door had just been slammed open. They told me things had been falling off counters, and my uncle was seeing things from the corner of his eyes. She didn't ask me to stop. She actually seemed intrigued. My aunt is into crystals and all kinds of groovy stuff. I kept this going. I wasn't able to astral project yet, but I was able to get parts of my body to leave, as weird as that sounds. I was able to remove my arm from my arm. It's a very odd feeling to describe. It feels like your arm is paralyzed, yet another one you can fully manipulate and feel is coming out of it. I was also able to do this with my right leg. For those who are not understanding what astral projection is, it means leaving your body. I'm not sure if your soul leaves your body or if you project it mentally. All I know is it's very real. I'm not here to persuade you one way or the other, but it's a thing. Supposedly, you're able to soul travel by doing this. In any case, a couple of weeks go by, and my uncle and aunt need to be gone for a couple of days, and I have the house to myself. So what do? Have a girl over like any normal guy would? No, I meditate and try to leave my body. By this point, I'm obsessed. For the first time, I fall asleep while meditating, and what proceeds to happen is one of the most traumatic and terrifying things to ever happen to me. Who am I kidding? It's by far the most terrifying experience of my life, and it haunts me to this day. This is the part of the story I don't like telling anyone because they dismiss it as a nightmare or, it's just sleep paralysis, bro. I don't care what you decide to call what I'm about to tell you. If you want to label it as fake, it was more real than life to me. I have astral projected a few times. I never saw anything very interesting other than my own home, freaking out my dogs. Mostly what I do is fly over lakes, factories at night, and the city. I can never do it for very long. I have not mastered it, and nowadays, I avoid the practice altogether, although it happens involuntarily still from time to time. What I experienced in this instance was different. It felt more physical, it felt more real, and I was attacked by God knows what. I wake up, laying flat on my bed, facing up, arms wide open and legs spread apart. The TV is on. The show Ink Master is running. It's night, but the room has a natural light to it, almost like a full moon. I see a shadow in the corner of the room. I try to get up, but I can't move. I'm paralyzed. I start being able to move, but I feel heavy, like trying to swim underwater. The shadow gets closer to me, and then crawls on top of my body. This is embarrassing to say, and I normally leave this part out of the story. This thing proceeds to put its hands between my legs and press and squeeze. You know, I feel immense physical pain. There is actually something gripping my body and really hurting me. I try to scream, but I can't. I start saying, "The power of Christ compels you," over and over, but it does nothing. My back starts to bend in an arch, and I'm slightly levitating over my bed. Everything is happening very silently, which allows me to hear loud footsteps coming from the kitchen. While this is all happening, a man walks from the kitchen into my room. I can barely see or look, but he is a middle-aged man wearing a suit, looking very old-fashioned. After several attempts of asking, my words finally come out. "Who are you?" The man standing in the corner of my room states, "My name is Lucer." I then ask, concerned, "Lucifer?" He states, "No, Lucer." The painful back arching and floating continues for a while, and then suddenly, it stops. I fall on my bed, and it's suddenly daylight. Ink Master is still on, and I can hear birds chirping. I never woke up from this like waking up from a dream. It simply stopped, and I was still awake. I spent the entire day looking things up online. trying to make sense of what happened. When night came again, the same thing happened. This entity, or whatever it is, grips me the same way and hurts me. You have to understand the pain is very physical and excruciating. I can feel its hands and fingers, and this time, I'm very upset. For one reason or another, this time I'm not afraid, and I start trying to strangle it. I start asking it to get me out of my body so I can confront it, and suddenly, it all stops, just like that. After this second episode, it never happened again. From time to time, I am still attacked by an entity that looks like me, and I am forced to fight it. But these are more like vivid nightmares, nothing like the situation I just described. I quit meditating. I quit trying to astral project, and this situation never happened again. I still involuntarily astral project in my sleep sometimes, but it's very uneventful. I don't see other entities or have bad or good things happen. I just float over a lake near my house and enjoy the view for the most part. Maybe there's more I could share, but I think I have shared enough. Thanks for getting this far. I never found out who Lucer was. For those who have asked if the Lucer entity was helping or not, I have no idea. I've spent years trying to figure out who that was and looking through my ancestry to see if it was a relative. Nothing. His energy didn't seem negative at all, but neither did it seem benevolent. It didn't seem like he was involved in it in any way. It seemed like just someone passing by who saw all of this happening. Thanks for watching our video. Have you ever had a really scary experience? We want to hear about it. You can tell us in 2 ways. Option 1 is, write down what happened and email it to us. The email address is in the description below. We're excited to read your story and learn all about what happened. And the second option is, record your story using your phone's recording feature. Make sure the sound is good, with no background noise. We want to make sure everyone can hear your scary story clearly. Pick whichever option works best for you, and let's explore your spooky experiences together. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel.